I always felt my husband was forced to marry me. Every time we were intimate, Parker only used his hands. Eventually, I gave up and decided to set him free, but the night before printing the divorce papers, I overheard him with his friends. "Why not touch your wife? She's right there," one said. "Nora might run off if you keep holding back." Parker sipped his whiskey. "You don't understand, she's delicate. What if I scare her?" His voice deepened. "She's my wife, I must cherish her. If she finds what I can't give elsewhere, fine, as long as she comes home to me." His friends laughed. "Then why secretly Google everything?" That night, I checked Parker's history, 99 searches, all variations of. "I finally married the girl I love, but I have a kink, how do I not scare her away?" The day Parker came back from his business trip, I had a battle plan. I showered, shaved, and put on a full face of makeup before slipping into the new, sinfully sheer nightgown I'd bought. Then, I slid into his side of the bed, waiting to be conquered. But when he walked out of the bathroom, the sight of me in his sheets made him freeze, the towel in his hand stilled mid-rub. "What are you doing here?" There wasn't a trace of warmth in his voice. My eyes roamed over him, from top to bottom. Parker's body was a work of art. Even the plush bathrobe couldn't hide the swell of his pectoral muscles or the faint outline of his abs. Logically, with a nose that sharp and fingers that long, he had to be well-equipped. And yet, in 6 months of marriage, I had never been allowed to get a deeper understanding. Refusing to be deterred, I decided to be direct. "I'm here to sleep with you." I didn't care what excuses he came up with. Tonight, he was mine. Parker's expression flickered, his gaze dropped to my lingerie, and after a long pause, he gave a clipped, "Fine." "That easy?" I was in disbelief. As he approached the bed, I felt a wave of uncertainty. The only light came from the small, mood-setting lamp on the nightstand. He lay down beside me, a wave of cool air and the clean scent of soap washing over me. My heart hammered against my ribs as I boldly wrapped my arms around his waist. Parker's entire body went rigid. A beat later, his head turned, his eyes finding mine in the dim light. His voice was a low rasp. "Do you want me to help you?" Before I could answer, he pulled away, his movement swift as he opened the nightstand drawer. The little spark of excitement inside me was instantly doused by the practiced ease of his actions. I didn't even need to ask, I knew what was coming next. He was going to fulfill his husbandly duties, just not with himself. A white-hot spike of anger shot through me. It was always like this. His own body was under lock and key, untouchable even when he was clearly aroused. When he pulled out the finger cots, my face darkened. I snatched them from his hand and threw them at his chest. "Help me with what? You're so damn vanilla, what new tricks could you possibly have?" My voice was sharp, brittle with frustration. The lamplight was too faint for me to see his expression clearly, but I could feel his dark eyes fixed on me, the intensity of his gaze like a physical touch. It was hot, and maybe, just maybe, laced with confusion. All the pent-up disappointment surged to the surface. "Parker, if you can't get it up, just say so. It's not like you're the only man on the planet. I can find someone else, anytime. We were married, for God's sake. Why did every encounter have to feel like he was doing me a reluctant favor?" "That's not what I meant," he said, his voice strained. But still, he made no move, not even to cut my face for a kiss. Anything would have been better than this cold distance. This was the third time I'd laid myself bare, only to be rejected. The disappointment was a crushing weight. I grabbed the robe I'd just discarded and stood up, then I stormed out, slamming the door with a thunderous crack that echoed the shattering of my patience. I ended up at my best friend Cassie's apartment. My phone buzzed relentlessly on the coffee table. "Not gonna get that?" Cassie asked, tilting her head. I threw back a shot of tequila, the burn in my throat a welcome distraction. With a sigh, I switched my phone off completely. "What kind of trashy cigarettes did you buy?" I grumbled, my voice already raspy, one puff and my throat's wrecked. Cassie just laughed, playfully tapping the colorful pack in her hand. "They look pretty, don't they?" She held it up for me to see, and with a few casual questions, she had the whole story out of me. Not that I was trying to hide it, there was one question that had been eating me alive. "Cassie, why won't Parker touch me?" "Maybe, he's not into women?" I shook my head. Parker had a girlfriend in high school, and since then, countless men and women had thrown themselves at him only to be met with a signature ice-cold rejection. Then, a thought sparked in my mind. My eyes narrowed. I bet he's saving himself for my perfect older sister, the one who ran off to Europe. I'd heard the rumors before, that Parker had always been in love with the gentle, quiet heiress of the Sinclair family. Now, it was all clicking into place. This marriage. I was just a stand-in. My sister was the one who was supposed to marry Parker, but she dumped him for her supposed soulmate, some artist she followed to another continent. Parker, ever the perfect gentleman, had never denied me anything in our 6 months of marriage, except for that one crucial thing, and every time he used his hands on me, watching my pleasure with that detached, controlled expression, there was never any desire in his eyes. He looked like a spectator at his own life. Did he find me disgusting? The thought hit me like a physical blow, and the fragile dam holding back my hurt broke. I slammed my glass down on the table with a loud crack. That's it, I've decided. Cassie jumped. Decided what? I'm divorcing him. A man who was all looks and no action was useless, no matter how handsome, especially one who was still hung up on someone else. I was Nora Sinclair, I didn't need him. Okay, easy there, no more drinking, Cassie said, clearly thinking I was just drunk and emotional. She dragged me off to take a shower. She'd just gotten a fresh manicure, and being a restless sleeper, she left a few angry red scratches on my neck by morning. The moment I turned my phone on, it exploded with notifications, all from Parker. When I got back to our villa, I was surprised to find him home. The air was thick with the smell of stale smoke, the ashtray on the coffee table overflowing with cigarette butts. He looked up, his sharp features cutting a striking figure even in the morning light. You're back, his voice was a gravelly whisper. Then his eyes landed on the marks on my neck, and his pupils contracted violently. The light in his gaze instantly went out, replaced by a chilling darkness. I hadn't slept well, and the combination of smoke and alcohol had left my throat raw. I was in no mood for a dramatic confrontation. Just as he was about to speak, I raised a hand, my voice raspy. I'm exhausted from last night, I'm going upstairs. I wasn't trying to be cruel, I was just done. I was really going to divorce him. A marriage without passion is a marriage without happiness. But, as fate would have it, I came down with a fever that night. My body felt like it was filled with lead, my head swimming in a thick fog. The door creaked open. Parker had just showered, and the crisp scent of mint from his body wash was so strong it almost made me gag. I wrinkled my nose and tried to push him away. Leave me alone. His body tensed. Then who should take care of you? His voice was deep, laced with a carefully restrained emotion. He was trying, desperately, to be gentle. Come on, be good, take the medicine, and you'll feel better. His cool fingertips brushed against my lips, and I saw his hand, resting on his thigh, clench into a tight fist. His gaze lingered on my mouth, his breathing growing heavier. I was completely oblivious. Being held by him felt uncomfortable, and I twisted away, trying to lie back down. Okay, you can go now. As I drifted in and out of consciousness, I thought I heard the sound of the shower running in the bathroom. It seemed Parker was taking another shower. When I woke up again, I was wrapped tightly in Parker's arms. The distinct feeling of something hard and hot pressed against my leg was impossible to ignore. His warm breath ghosted across my ear as he stirred, his hand coming up to feel my forehead. Still a little warm, the fever hasn't completely broken yet. I was wide awake now. It's not the fever making me hot, you idiot. It's you. I tried to elbow him away, but he expertly caught me by the waist. His callous thumb brushed lightly against my skin, sending a jolt of electricity through me. A small gasp escaped my lips. Nora. Parker's voice was a low, husky whisper, carrying a magnetic pull that was hard to resist. Should we try? On any other day, I would have jumped at the chance, but after the last few days, a wall had gone up between us. To me, this felt like a slap followed by a piece of candy, a pathetic offering. Still weak from the fever, my body ached. I turned my face away, my voice cold. I can't, I'm too tired. The man behind me went utterly still. I could feel the tremor in his breath as the life seemed to drain out of him. With a visible effort, Parker pulled back, creating a small distance between us. He said nothing. When I finally turned to look at him, his eyes were dark pools of sorrow, a bitter smile twisting his lips. It's my fault, I don't blame you. I let out a cold snort. At least he had some self-awareness. But please, he continued, his voice barely a whisper, don't push yourself so hard next time. It's not good for your body to get a fever like that. Parker lowered his gaze, hiding whatever raw emotion was swirling within him. Before I could process his words, he stood up and went to the closet to get clothes for me. He usually wore silk pajamas, but for once, he was wearing only a towel wrapped low on his hips. The sculpted lines of his muscles and the tantalizing V of his torso were on full display. My eyes traced the firm curve of his waist and the tight clench of his glutes, and my heart gave a little flutter. But that was all. Any handsome man standing in front of me would have had the same effect. Parker handed me the clothes. Without a second thought, I started changing right in front of him. As expected, he immediately turned away, his eyes fixed firmly on the wall. What I didn't know was that the moment I left the room, Parker walked straight back into my bathroom. A few days later, I started noticing some of my clothes were missing. At first, I didn't think much of it. They weren't expensive pieces, and I had plenty of others. But then, the lace lingerie set Cassie had bought me last week vanished. I couldn't figure it out. We didn't have cameras in the house, so there was no way to identify the pervert. Finally, over dinner one evening, I brought it up with Parker. I think we have a thief. He was calmly sitting at the table, spreading butter on a piece of my toast. He paused for a fraction of a second at my words. Without looking up, he asked, his voice steady, what's missing? Lingerie. I said it nonchalantly, but his reaction was anything but. The butter knife slipped, smearing a dollop of yellow across the small mole on the back of his hand. My eyes narrowed, watching his uncharacteristic clumsiness. Why so nervous? Did you take it? Parker was silent for a few seconds before letting out a soft, humorless laugh. His long, dark eyes met mine. What do you think? Before heading to the office, Parker was always impeccably dressed. He wore a pair of thin, gold-rimmed glasses for his slight nearsightedness, which only served to accentuate the depth of his features. Right now, behind those lenses, his black pupils seemed colder than the sunlight streaming through the window. I offered a light smile. What did I think? Parker was the epitome of buttoned-up, straight-laced propriety, and besides, what on earth would he do with my underwear? I decided to drop it. What time will you be back tonight? I have something for you. The divorce papers were ready. Parker handed me the toast, his reply coming instantly. Whenever you want me, I'll be back as soon as I can. He said it so quickly, the words tumbling out, that I barely registered the meaning behind them. His phone rang. The assistant waiting in the driveway came in with a briefcase, reminding him he was late. Parker left. I placed a hand over my chest, where my heart had just skipped a beat. My other hand went to my ear, which was inexplicably burning hot. I was both flustered and annoyed. Why couldn't he just talk normally? What was with all the flirting? After my meal, I took a trip to the doctor's office. He told me I had a hormonal imbalance and that finding a man to regulate things would be beneficial. The moment Cassie heard this, she was practically vibrating with excitement, offering to lend me the services of a chiseled model with 8-pack abs and a young stud with packs for days from her agency. At the time, I was sitting in my air-conditioned studio, sketching out the line art for my graphic novel, completely absorbed in perfecting my characters. I immediately shut her down. She cut straight to the chase. You've been breaking out lately, haven't you? Her words hit a nerve. I mentally cursed Parker's name again. 2 pimples. Right on my chin. You know what they say, the grass is always greener. Besides, you two are about to get divorced anyway. You're really not going to try? Cassie's voice was a siren's call of temptation. I put down my pencil. I was stuck on the design for a side character's face. A little real-life reference couldn't hurt. Looking only, no touching. So my testosterone was a little high. Once I was divorced, I could find 180 men if I wanted, but not now. It wasn't because I was a coward. I just had high moral standards. I didn't just go around lusting after men's bodies. Cassie laughed, clearly not buying my claims of self-control. I was full of confidence at the time, but that night, as I slept, my own mind betrayed me. I had the most vivid, steamy dream. In it, I was locked in a passionate kiss with a man, our bodies tangled together, our breaths mingled, his hot and heavy against my skin, the sound of our mouths moving together pulling me deeper and deeper into a rising tide of pleasure. I was lost in his bold exploration, completely immersed in a world of shared ecstasy. It was pure bliss. Until, I saw Parker's face, inches from mine. I jolted awake, my heart pounding, my body slick with a cold sweat. The phantom sensations of the dream still lingered. My legs felt weak as I made my way downstairs for a glass of water. That's when I heard the lazy, teasing voices from the living room. You know, some people are absolutely drowning in desire, but they're so afraid of scaring their wives that they just suffer in silence, not naming any names, of course. Peeking around the corner, I saw Parker's closest friends lounging on the sofas, whiskey glasses in hand, their tones dripping with mockery. Women can't resist a little temptation. Parker, you keep this up, and Nora's gonna run off with someone else. You'll be crying before you know it. These guys were close enough to Parker to say whatever they wanted. In response, Parker just lifted his glass and took a slow sip, his handsome face an unreadable mask. He said something that made his friends roar with laughter, and a prickle of suspicion ran down my spine. They mentioned he had a secret blog, a private account where he posted things. Driven by a mix of curiosity and a desire to finally get some leverage on him, I mentally replayed the username they'd mentioned. I typed it in, and sure enough, an account with the same profile picture as Parker's official one popped up. I clicked on it and saw a pinned post at the top. I was expecting to find some typical, crass locker room talk. But the words on the screen made me freeze. It read, I finally married the girl I've been in love with for years, but I have a specific kink. How do I make it a good experience for her without scaring her away? The next post. The world is full of temptations, and she thinks I'm boring. It's my fault. If I tried to please her like this, would she reject me? Attached was a picture of a male butler costume and a small, silver bell collar. In an instant, all the blood in my body rushed to my head. My thumb hovered over the screen, trembling. The photo was unmistakable. It was a mirror selfie, cropped at the neck, but I knew those hands. I knew the scar on the left index finger from when he'd cut himself slicing a bagel for me 3 months ago. I scrolled down. The blog wasn't just a few posts, it was a diary of obsession. August 12th, she wore the blue silk dress today. I wanted to fall to my knees and kiss the hem, but I just told her it looked professional. I am a coward. September 4th, I stole her unwashed stockings. I'm sick. If she knew how much I wanted to be under her heel, she'd look at me with disgust. She deserves a strong man, not a servant. October 1st, she thinks I'm cold. I'm just trying not to devour her. The realization hit me like a bucket of ice water, followed immediately by a rush of heat so intense it made my toes curl. Parker wasn't gay, he wasn't in love with my sister. He was a submissive, or at least, he had a service kink so severe it was crippling him. He didn't want to conquer me, he wanted to be conquered. The missing lingerie, the refusal to initiate standard sex, the way he froze when I touched him, not out of repulsion, but out of an overwhelming effort to restrain himself. I sat back on the sofa, the sounds of his friend's laughter in the other room fading into white noise, a slow, dangerous smile spread across my face. For 6 months, I had been crying over a man I thought didn't want me. In reality, he wanted me so much he was terrified of his own hunger. Nora? I looked up. Parker was standing in the doorway, his tie loosened, his eyes scanning the room for me. He looked tired. "You're up late," he said, his voice dropping to that habitual, guarded monotone. I stood up, clutching my phone. I didn't say a word, I just walked past him, brushing my shoulder against his chest. I felt him inhale sharply, his body going rigid. "Come to the bedroom," I whispered, "now." I didn't wait for him, I walked straight to our room and sat on the edge of the bed. My heart was hammering, but for the first time in our marriage, it wasn't from anxiety, it was from power. Parker entered a moment later. He closed the door and stood there, his hands hanging awkwardly by his sides. "Is everything okay? You look." "Take off your glasses," I said. It wasn't a question, it was a command. Parker blinked, confusion knitting his brows. "What?" I said, "Take off your glasses, and your jacket." He hesitated for a fraction of a second, but then his hands moved. He folded the glasses and placed them on the dresser, then shrugged off his suit jacket. Without the barrier of the lenses, his eyes looked darker, more vulnerable. "Nora, if this is about the divorce." "Shut up about the divorce." I crossed my legs, letting the hem of my nightgown ride up high on my thigh. I saw his gaze snap to the exposed skin, his Adam's apple bobbing. "Come here." He walked toward me, stopping 2 feet away. "Closer." He took another step. "On your knees, Parker." The silence in the room was deafening. Parker went completely still, his eyes widened, a flicker of panic warring with something else, something raw and hungry. "Nora. I don't think." Did I stutter? I kept my voice low, steady. "I'm tired of looking up at you, get on your knees." He trembled. It was a minute tremor that started in his hands and traveled up his arms, then, slowly, gracefully, the CEO of Sinclair Enterprises, the man who commanded boardrooms and terrified interns, sank down onto the plush carpet. He looked up at me, his breath hitching. He looked like a man approaching a deity. I reached out and threaded my fingers through his hair. He leaned into the touch instantly, a ragged sigh escaping his lips. "You've been a bad husband, Parker," I murmured, scratching lightly against his scalp. "I know," he choked out. "I'm sorry, Shoo." I used my other hand to pull up the photo on my phone, the one of the caller. I turned the screen toward him. Parker's face drained of color. He looked as if I'd just held a gun to his head. "Nora, I can explain, it's not." "I'm not." He started to scramble backward, shame radiating off him in waves. "It's disgusting, I know. I was going to delete it. Please, don't look at me like that." "Like what?" I dropped the phone on the bed and leaned forward, grabbing his tie to jerk him back toward me. Our faces were inches apart. "You think I'm disgusted?" I whispered against his lips. "Parker, you have no idea how frustrated I've been. I thought you hated me." "Hate you?" His voice broke. "I worship the ground you walk on." "Then show me." I kissed him, but this time, I didn't wait for him to respond. I bit his lower lip, hard. He groaned, a guttural sound that vibrated through my chest. His hands came up to hover over my waist, terrified to touch. "Touch me," I commanded, "but not like a husband. Touch me like I own you." The dam broke. His hands gripped my hips, bruising in their intensity. He buried his face in my lap, inhaling my scent like a drowning man gasping for air. There was no hesitation now, only a desperate, frantic need to please. The next morning, I woke up alone. Panic flared for a second. Had he run away? Had the shame been too much? Then the bathroom door opened. Parker walked out, fully dressed in a suit, carrying a tray. "Breakfast," he said quietly. He set the tray on the nightstand, eggs, Benedict, perfectly poached, coffee, black, exactly how I liked it. But something was different. He wouldn't meet my eyes. His ears were a burning shade of red. "Parker. I have to go to work," he said quickly, adjusting his cuffs. "The merger meeting." "Come here." He froze. The conditioning from last night was already taking root. He walked to the side of the bed. I reached out and took his hand. He was trembling again. "About last night," he started, his voice tight. "It was the best night of my life," I said firmly. His head snapped up, shock written all over his face. "We are going to make some changes, Parker. No more hiding, no more secret blogs. If you want to worship me, you do it to my face, understand?" He swallowed hard. You're not leaving?" "I was going to," I admitted, I have the papers printed. He flinched. But, I continued, I'm burning them, under one condition. Anything, he breathed. You never hide from me again, and tonight, bring the collar. Parker looked like he was about to pass out from a combination of relief and arousal. He brought my hand to his lips, kissing the knuckles with a reverence that made my heart ache. Yes, mistress, he whispered. The word hung in the air, heavy and electric. He turned and left for work, but I noticed a bounce in his step that hadn't been there before. The dynamic shift wasn't seamless, we had years of misunderstanding to undo. 3 days later, we were at a gala. The perfect sister issue finally reared its head. My sister, Elena, had returned from Europe. She was at the event, surrounded by admirers. She was everything I wasn't: tall, blonde, ethereal. I felt Parker stiffen beside me as we approached her. Parker, Elena cooed, stepping forward to hug him. It's been so long. I watched them, the old insecurity clawing at my throat. This was the woman he was rumored to love. Parker stepped back politely. Hello, Elena. I heard you two married, she said, her eyes flickering to me with a hint of pity. I was surprised. I always thought you'd wait for, well, better timing. It was a subtle dig. I thought you'd wait for me to break up with my artist boyfriend. I felt my spine straighten. I was about to retort when Parker spoke. I waited 3 years for Nora to notice me, he said, his voice ice cold and loud enough for the surrounding circle to hear. I didn't care about timing, I just cared about her. Elena blinked, her smile faltering. Oh, I just meant. Nora is the only Sinclair I've ever looked at, Parker interrupted, his hand finding the small of my back, possessive, heavy. Excuse us. He guided me away toward the balcony. Once we were outside in the cool night air, I turned to him. Did you mean that? Parker looked offended. You still think I wanted her? Everyone said. Everyone is an idiot, he growled. He backed me up against the stone railing, his body shielding me from the party. Nora, do you remember the library in high school? You used to fall asleep in the corner study corral. Yeah. I used to sit 3 tables away just to make sure no one woke you up. I returned your overdue books for you. When you dated that quarterback senior year, I almost got expelled for keying his car when he made you cry. My mouth fell open. That was you? It's always been you, he said, his forehead resting against mine. I was just too intense. I knew I wasn't normal. I thought if I showed you the real me, you'd run, so I tried to be the perfect gentleman, and I nearly lost you. I reached up, cupping his face. I don't want a gentleman, Parker, I want you. His eyes darkened. Careful, Nora, we're in public. I don't care. Take me home. Home became our sanctuary. The spare bedroom, previously an office, was converted. Parker insisted on it. He wanted a space where he could let go of control completely. But the most surprising thing was how it affected his day-to-day life. The more submission he gave me in the bedroom, the more confident he became in the world. The anxiety that had plagued him, the fear of losing me, vanished. However, old habits die hard. I was cleaning out his closet one afternoon, a task he usually forbade, claiming he had it handled, when I found a shoebox on the top shelf. Inside wasn't just the missing lace lingerie. It was a collection, a lipstick I'd lost months ago, a ribbon from a bouquet I'd held at our wedding, a singular, preserved rose petal. It was a shrine. I sat on the floor, staring at the items. In any other context, this would be the start of a horror movie, but knowing Parker, knowing how he'd starved himself of my affection while living in the same house. Nora? Parker stood in the doorway. He'd come home early. He saw the box, his face went gray. I can explain, he rasped. You really are a magpie, aren't you? I asked softly, holding up the ribbon. He dropped to his knees without being asked, crawling across the floor until he was at my feet. He didn't beg for forgiveness, he just laid his head on my knee, waiting for judgment. It was the only way I could feel close to you, he mumbled into my jeans. When you were sleeping, or when you were out, I just needed pieces of you. I ran my fingers through his hair. You have all of me now, Parker, you don't need the scraps. I know, old habits. Keep them, I decided. He looked up, surprised. Keep them to remind you of how miserable you were when you tried to hide from me, and if I ever catch you stealing my panties again without asking, I lowered my voice, you will be punished. His pupils dilated, swallowing the iris. Yes, Nora. 6 months passed, the divorce papers were long gone, burned in the fireplace on a rainy Tuesday. But life has a way of testing you when you're happiest. Parker's company came under attack, a hostile takeover bid, orchestrated by a rival firm that had dug up dirt, not financial dirt, personal dirt. They didn't have the blog, but they had photos. Photos of Parker on his knees in our living room, taken through a gap in the curtains by a paparazzi drone. The headline screamed, CEO of Sinclair Enterprises, submissive weakling? I found Parker in his study, the lights were off, he was sitting behind his desk, staring at the tablet. He looked destroyed, the confident man I'd built up was gone, replaced by the terrified boy who thought he was unlovable. It's over, he said, his voice hollow. the board will call for my resignation, the stock is plummeting, and you," he laughed bitterly, "you're the wife of the laughingstock." I walked over and took the tablet from his hands. I looked at the photo. It was grainy, but it was clearly him. He was kneeling, kissing my hand. "You look good here," I said. Parker looked at me like I was insane. "Nora, did you hear me? They are calling me weak. They are saying I'm unfit to lead because I submit to my wife. And I've humiliated you." He stood up, pacing frantically. "I should grant you that divorce now, save your reputation. You can say you didn't know, that I forced this weirdness on you." "Parker." I slammed my hand on the desk. "Stop." He froze. "You think I care what a bunch of old men in suits think?" I walked around the desk. "You think I care if the world knows you love me? It's not love to them, Nora. It's perversion. It's weakness." "Weakness?" I laughed. "It takes more strength to trust someone with your vulnerability than it does to bark orders. You are 10 times the man they are." I grabbed his lapels. "Fix your tie, we're going to the press conference." "What?" "No, I'm canceling it." "You are not. You are Parker Sinclair, and I am Nora Sinclair. We don't hide." The flashbulbs were blinding. Reporters were shouting questions, their voices overlapping in a chaotic cacophony. "Mr. Sinclair, are the photos real? Is it true you take orders from your wife? Mrs. Sinclair, are you forcing your husband to?" Parker stood at the podium, his face pale. I stood right beside him, my hand resting firmly on his arm. I could feel the tension in his muscles, coiled tight like a spring. He leaned into the microphone. "The photos are real," he said. The room went silent. "What I do in the privacy of my home is my business," Parker continued, his voice gaining strength. "But if you are asking if I respect my wife? If I adore her? If I would do anything she asks of me because she is the most intelligent, capable partner I could ask for? Then yes." He looked at the camera, his gaze turning steely. The submissive was gone, the CEO was back. "And if anyone thinks that my devotion to my wife makes me weak in the boardroom, I invite you to try and take my company. You will find that I am very aggressive when protecting what is mine." He stepped back. I stepped forward. "My husband," I said, smiling sweetly at the vultures, "is a man secure enough in his masculinity to not need to prove it every second of the day. He treats me like a queen. Perhaps if more men did the same, the divorce rate wouldn't be so high." I looked at Parker. "Shall we go, darling?" He offered me his arm. "Lead the way." We didn't just survive the scandal, we thrived on it. The stock initially dipped, then skyrocketed. It turned out, women loved a powerful man who worshipped his wife, and the younger generation found the honesty refreshing. Parker became something of an accidental icon. But none of that mattered to us. 1 year later, on our 2nd anniversary, I was sitting in the studio, finishing the final pages of my graphic novel. It was a bestseller before it even hit the shelves. The protagonist was a dark, brooding knight who pledged his sword to a sorceress. Parker walked in. He was holding a small box. He didn't say a word. He just placed the box on my desk, walked around to my chair, and knelt. He didn't need to be told anymore. It was his natural state when he wanted to show affection. I opened the box. It was a ring, not a diamond, but a simple band of black obsidian and gold. "A renewal?" I asked. "A promise," he said, resting his chin on my thigh. "I spent my whole life thinking I was broken, that I had to hide the parts of me that wanted to give up control. You didn't just accept them, Nora, you made them beautiful." He kissed the fabric of my jeans. "You saved me." I looked down at him, my husband, my partner, my submissive. I remembered the lonely nights, the misunderstanding, the anger. It felt like a lifetime ago. "I didn't save you, Parker," I said softly, sliding my hand down to cup his jaw, forcing him to look into my eyes. "I just set you free." He smiled, a genuine, brilliant smile that reached his eyes. "What are your orders for tonight, Mrs. Sinclair?" I smirked, closing my sketchbook. "Lock the doors, turn off the phones." I leaned down and whispered in his ear, "I have a new scene I need to research." Parker shivered, his eyes darkening with that familiar, beautiful hunger. "As you wish."